The ballroom glowed with golden light, laughter floating through the air like champagne bubbles. Couples danced under the chandeliers, silk gowns sweeping across the marble floor, and every table was filled, except for one. At that lonely table near the window sat Maya Ellis, 31, mother of one, dressed in a pale blue gown she'd borrowed from her best friend, the bride. Her glass of champagne sat untouched, beads of condensation sliding down the crystal stem. She'd promised herself she'd stay at least until dessert. For Alina, her best friend since college. Alina had begged her to come. Greater than, you work too hard, Maya. You need a night to breathe, and maybe meet someone. Maya had laughed then. Meet someone. As if anyone wanted to meet a single mom who spent her nights folding laundry and helping with spelling tests. Her life revolved around Liam, her 6-year-old son, and that was fine by her. Still, sitting alone while couples swayed to the slow rhythm of a jazz quartet, she felt a pang of something she didn't want to name. She looked around the room, at the husbands leaning close to whisper in their wives' ears, the lovers sharing small smiles over candlelight. Her chest tightened. Once upon a time, she'd imagined having that too. Excuse me, a deep voice said suddenly, pulling her from her thoughts. Maya turned, and froze. The man standing beside her was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair brushed back and a sharp jawline that looked like it belonged in a magazine ad. His navy suit fit him perfectly, every line crisp and confident. Is this seat taken? He asked, one brow slightly raised. She blinked. No, it's not. He smiled, the corner of his mouth tilting in that easy, practiced way that made her pulse skip. Mind if I join you? Go ahead, she said, gesturing to the chair. He sat down, exuding calm authority, the kind of quiet confidence that made people notice even when he said nothing. I'm Ethan, he said. Maya, nice to meet you, Maya. You look like you could use some company. She gave a small, nervous laugh. Is it that obvious? Only a little, he teased, eyes glinting. I'd say you've been counting the minutes until you can leave. Maybe, she admitted. I'm not really the wedding type. He leaned back in his chair. Me neither. I'm only here because the groom's uncle is a business partner. Thought I'd make an appearance and sneak out early. So he was one of those guests, the powerful, well-connected kind who didn't really belong but somehow elevated every event they attended. Then he leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. Actually, there's another reason I came over here. I could use your help. Maya blinked. My help? He nodded. Mr. Haynes, the bride's uncle, keeps trying to set me up with his daughter. She's lovely, but I'm not interested. I'd rather avoid the drama. If you could pretend to be my date tonight, I'd owe you one. Maya stared at him. You want me to pretend to be your date? He shrugged, smiling faintly. It's harmless. Just a little act. You'd be saving me a very awkward evening. Her first instinct was to refuse. She didn't know him, and pretending to be someone's date, worse, someone like him, felt absurd. But then she noticed a few guests glancing her way, their whispers soft but unmistakable. The single woman sitting alone. The outsider. Maybe this would save both of them. After a long pause, she said, all right. But only for tonight. Ethan grinned, offering his hand across the table. Deal. When their palms met, a strange warmth ran up her arm. As the band struck another slow tune, he stood and extended his hand again. Dance with me, Mrs. Tonight. She laughed, shaking her head. You're ridiculous. Maybe. But you're smiling now, he said softly. And he was right. She let him lead her to the dance floor. The moment his hand settled at the small of her back, her breath caught. His touch was firm but gentle, his scent, cedar and something clean, dizzying. You're surprisingly good at this, she murmured as they swayed. I don't usually have the right partner, he said, eyes never leaving hers. The words were simple, but the way he said them made her heartbeat falter. They danced through one song, then another. Conversation flowed easily, about music, about Alina's over-the-top cake, about little things that somehow felt like big ones. She told him about working at a cafe, he told her he ran a company, though he didn't say what kind. Let me guess, she teased. You're the kind of boss who never takes a vacation. He chuckled. You're not wrong, but maybe I just never had a reason to. Something in his tone made her chest flutter, and she hated that it did. When they returned to their table, Alina passed by, eyes sparkling. Greater than, Maya, you didn't tell me you brought a date. Before Maya could correct her, Ethan slipped an arm casually around her waist. We like to keep things quiet, he said smoothly. Alina winked. Well, you two look perfect together. When she walked off, Maya turned to him, half amused, half exasperated. You really didn't have to say that. Didn't I? You're saving me, remember? She rolled her eyes, but she didn't move away from his arm. Hours passed. They laughed, they danced again, and for a while, the world beyond that ballroom didn't exist. No bills, no exhaustion, no late-night worries about Liam's future. Just the warm weight of his hand, the sound of his voice, and the way he looked at her like she wasn't invisible. When the evening wound down, Ethan walked her outside into the cool night air. I had a good time, he said, eyes softening. Thank you for rescuing me. I should be thanking you, she admitted. It's been a long time since I felt like I belonged anywhere. He hesitated, then brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. You deserve to feel that every day, Maya. The world seemed to still. She felt her breath catch again, the same way it had when he'd first touched her hand. Then he smiled, that quiet, knowing smile. Pretend or not, tonight felt real. She looked up at him, her heart thudding. Yeah, she whispered. It did. He stepped closer, as if wanting to say something more, but then a car pulled up, her ride home. He opened the door for her, his hand lingering for just a second on the frame. Maybe one day, he said softly, we don't have to pretend. Maya smiled faintly, slipping into the car. Maybe. As the vehicle pulled away, she glanced back through the window. Ethan stood under the streetlight, hands in his pockets, watching her leave, a man who had everything, and yet, maybe, felt just as lonely as she once had. For the first time in years, Maya didn't feel invisible. And as she thought of the stranger who'd whispered, pretend I'm your husband tonight, she wondered if fate had just stopped pretending too. The wedding glittered with golden light, the kind that made everything, the flowers, the laughter, the couples, seem softer and more perfect than real life. Everyone had someone, everyone except Maya Ellis. She sat at a round table near the dance floor, a pale blue gown hugging her figure, her hair pinned up the way her best friend Alina had insisted. Alina was the bride tonight, glowing, radiant, and happy. Maya was proud of her. Truly. But sitting alone in a room full of couples made something ache deep inside. She hadn't been to a wedding since her own, the one that ended before she could even call it a marriage. Her ex-husband had left when their son, Liam, was barely one. Since then, Maya's life had been a quiet cycle of work, motherhood, and surviving. Tonight, Alina had begged her to come. Greater than, you need one night to breathe, Maya. To remember you're still you. So she'd come, and ended up here, alone, pretending she didn't care. Excuse me, came a voice from behind her, deep and steady. Maya turned, and blinked. A tall man stood there, impossibly composed in a navy suit. His dark hair gleamed under the chandeliers, and his gray eyes held the calm of someone who knew exactly who he was. Is this seat taken? She shook her head. No, go ahead. He smiled, polite, practiced. The kind of smile that looked expensive. Thank you. He sat beside her, placing his glass down gently. I'm Ethan, he said after a moment. Maya. Nice to meet you, Maya. You look like someone who'd rather be anywhere but here. She laughed softly. Is it that obvious? He tilted his head, only to someone who feels the same. They talked. It started with small things, the music, the food, the way Alina cried during her vows. She learned he was there for business. Apparently, the bride's uncle was one of his company's investors. He learned she worked part-time at a cafe and full-time as a mom. Then, halfway through their conversation, he leaned closer, voice dropping. I need a favor. Maya blinked. A favor? He nodded, a trace of mischief in his eyes. The bride's uncle has been trying to set me up with his daughter all night. Sweet girl, but not my type. I'd rather avoid the whole matchmaking mess. Would you pretend to be my wife for the evening? She froze. Your wife? He gave a small, sheepish grin. It'll keep him from trying. You'd be doing me a big favor. She wanted to say no, it was ridiculous. But then she noticed people glancing her way, whispering, their eyes flicking between her empty seat and the happy couples around. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to play along. All right, she said slowly, but just for tonight. Ethan's grin widened. Deal. He extended his hand. She took it, and felt a spark she couldn't explain. The band shifted into a slow song. He stood, offering his hand again. Come on, Mrs. Tonight. She rolled her eyes but smiled, letting him pull her to the dance floor. Under the glow of the chandeliers, with his hand resting lightly on her waist, Maya forgot everything, the bills, the exhaustion, the loneliness. For those few minutes, she wasn't a single mom or a woman trying to hold her world together. She was just his partner, swaying in rhythm with the music. And when he leaned close and whispered, "Pretend I'm your husband tonight," her heart skipped, because for a heartbeat too long, it didn't feel like pretending at all. Part 2. When pretending ends. The night ended too soon. The lights dimmed, the laughter softened, and people began to leave with shoes in hand and memories in their eyes. Ethan walked Maya to the front steps of the hall, where the cool night air met the lingering warmth of music. "I had a good time," she said, smiling shyly. "Me too," he replied. Then, more softly, "You made it better." They stood in silence for a moment, unsure how to say goodbye to something that wasn't supposed to mean anything. When her ride arrived, Ethan opened the door for her. "Thank you for saving me, Mrs. Tonight," she laughed lightly. "And thank you for making me feel seen." He hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You deserve to be seen, Maya." She didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt his hand in hers, his voice in her ear. 3 days later, she walked into the cafe where she worked, and froze. He was there, Ethan, sitting at a corner table, a laptop open, a cup of coffee untouched beside him. When their eyes met, his face broke into a slow smile. "Maya," he said, standing. "Looks like fate's working overtime." She gaped. "What are you doing here?" He lifted his coffee. "Market research. My company's opening a new branch nearby. I didn't realize you worked here." She crossed her arms, trying to sound casual. "So, you're following me now?" He chuckled. "Not yet, but I might, if the coffee's this good." Her coworkers exchanged looks, whispering behind the counter. Maya felt her cheeks flush. They talked again, this time without music or make-believe. She learned his company was expanding into community cafes to support local single-parent initiatives. He listened when she spoke, genuinely. Not out of politeness, but out of interest. When her shift ended, he waited outside. "Can I walk you home?" She hesitated, then nodded. They talked about everything. Their parents, their fears, their favorite childhood snacks. When she mentioned Liam, Ethan's expression softened. "You're raising him on your own?" She nodded. "Since he was 1. It's hard sometimes, but he's my reason for everything." He was quiet for a long moment. "You know, I grew up without a dad," he said finally. Men who walk away never realize what they leave behind. Her heart ached at the honesty in his tone. At her door, he turned to her. "You know, that night, I said, pretend I'm your husband. But I meant something else." Maya looked up. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly. "I meant, let me be the man who stands beside you, even when the music stops." She stared at him, her breath catching. "Ethan," she whispered, "I don't know if I'm ready for something like that." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll wait. No pretending this time." And with that, he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, nothing rushed, nothing forced, and walked away into the night. Maya stood there long after he was gone, her heart racing, her mind spinning. For the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her, hope. Maybe love didn't always arrive with flowers and grand gestures. Sometimes, it showed up at a wedding, sat beside you, and whispered words that woke your heart.